Hello there, welcome back to the second ever episode of Off The Record here on VGC. My name is Steven McInerney and I've got two of the best guests I could possibly wish for on today's episode. We're going to be looking at the Xbox Game Showcase from last night. Good morning, guys. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm all right, yeah. How are you?
I'm okay, yeah. I'm in a cottage in Wales, but I had to get on Zoom this morning to talk to you guys about it because we can't really miss that out, can we? Chris obviously is from GamesIndustry.biz and we've got our very own Andy Robinson here as well.
Hello.
Morning, you all right, Andy?
Yeah, I think everyone's very tired. We've got up very early to talk about Xbox after working very late.
But that's
talking
good,
about
isn't
Xbox.
It? Talking about Xbox, we all want to
yeah.
talk about Xbox. Let's talk about Xbox then, because obviously, as you may know if you're watching this, the showcase happened last night. There's loads of talking points, and we can't really start anywhere when you're talking about Xbox if you're not going to start with Halo. Initial reactions from you guys, and there's been a lot of discussions about the visual fidelity of this game. Is it disappointing, Chris?
Maybe. I mean, it looked like Halo. I mean, I don't think there's only so much you can do with Halo, right? I think it looked like it ran very smoothly. I think that was the big thing that people liked about it. There was some dodgy looking screenshots that were doing the rounds.
Oh man, how on earth did those assets get approved? Like seriously, as someone who's produced screenshots for like a video game that have gone out, everywhere on Xbox.com, etc. I cannot believe those assets got approved. Can't believe it. Apparently, the really awful one with the wall guy. There's one like screenshot of like a brute, like from side on, and it looks like an Xbox 360 game. Honestly, it's an awful screenshot. Apparently, they've already pulled that particular screenshot, but I just don't know how it gets approved. Like, if there's someone who's made screenshots, you spend, hours per screenshot, positioning everything, making sure it looks beautiful. I mean, you're not photoshopping it, but obviously they are all staged to some degree. They're not playing the game and then hitting, F5 or whatever at the exact moment and hoping it's all right. You're positioning stuff. So someone has, actually sat and painstakingly orchestrated these awful screenshots, and then someone has looked at them and gone, yes.
But I mean, once again, it's Xbox. Halo is, as you said, it did look good in motion, didn't it, Chris? It did kind of. Look really fun.
I saw it. I saw it last night. I had a meeting with 343, and they kind of showed the demo again with narrated commentary. So it was the same demo. So I've watched it a few times now, and it's a good-looking game. I mean, it reminded me of Call of Duty, right? Like Call of Duty is in a screenshot. I mean, maybe less so today, but if you think back to the kind of last gen Call of Duties, they were geared entirely for motion and action, right? They're action games. Yeah. They you can make pretty textures and pretty geometry, but if you're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, that doesn't serve the game. It has to feel great. It has to be fluid, right? Yeah. Especially when you think about what this Halo game is doing. I think it's probably a little bit unfair, some of the reaction. All right, let's be clear though, the screenshot assets are crap. Like I don't know why they've gone out, but in motion I don't think it's really fair to criticize it because of what it's doing. I mean, it does look as a passing resemblance, it does look like an Xbox One game, but it's a big open world. It's got a full ray traced environment, which is hugely demanding on hardware. Apparently it has like a full day and night cycle. So clearly the game is doing a lot of stuff that we're not necessarily seeing in an 8-minute demo. And really, I mean, from speaking to 343, that demo very clearly was designed to hit home that this is a Halo game. We're not messing about with
it was pure Halo, wasn't
abilities. Yeah, there was a lot of criticism for the last one about, a lot of the changes they made. Like certainly with 4 and 5, which are obviously the debut of a new studio on this franchise, they veered a little bit from what the original Halo formula. I think they wanted to kind of put their mark on it and reinvent it a bit. There's new enemies and different kind of abilities, and it controlled quite different. I think with this one, very clearly from their messaging, like they said spiritual reboot at least 50 times. They wanted to hit home with, this is Halo like you remember.
How did you feel about the trailer then in general, Chris? Because obviously, I mean, it's very, very Halo. And I don't mean that as that's obviously a very good thing for some people, because this is meant to be, is it fair to call it meant to be the system seller initially at very least, because it is obviously the launch game. Do you think it's going to serve its purpose? Is it going to do as well as, I guess, Xbox wanted to, given, all the graphical fidelity discussions and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think we kind of look at the press conference with, and I still do it, even though I know, with old eyes. So I'm looking at it going, how is this going to sell Series X? It looks like Halo. I think it looks probably the nicest looking Halo, but it still looks like Halo. Halo's always been quite a relatively unfussy game. And I know people, I've got my brother, I like Halo, but my brother is a massive fan of Halo. He saw that and he was very excited. So
there we go, yeah.
I know, I take that as being great. So they've done its job. But we look at it, like, we looked at that press event as a Series X press event. But I sort of, afterwards, like a couple of hours afterwards, I thought it was really a Game Pass event, right? And when you looked at which is the big Game Pass thing that's coming up, and it's Halo, and that is going to sell a lot. It's going to get a lot of people subscribing. I don't know if they still do the $1 deal or whatever. You can play that game for a month for $1, and then you might thinking, this is brilliant. I like the multiplayer. I'm looking forward to whatever else I've got coming up. I'll subscribe and I'll carry on my subscription. And I think, in that regard, I think that was clearly that's their Witcher. If you think Netflix and The Witcher last Christmas, this year it's Halo and Game Pass and Halo. Obviously, it also needs to try and show off the potential of Series X. Although I felt that actually the games that will probably do that were the ones that they sort of teased but didn't show, the Fables and the Forzes and the Everwilds and those sort of things. I think Andy said it looked like an Xbox One game. That's how this started. It started off as an Xbox One game that they're now bringing over to the next console.
It's almost like a conflicting stance, right? That I guess they don't need to either way, but if you think of it as, they want this thing to sell some hardware and they want it to drive some Game Pass subs. I mean, obviously Game Pass is their priority, as we know. They don't necessarily meld those two objectives, do they? Like, I mean, no. It wouldn't serve Microsoft at all for that game to be a Series X exclusive, because it would drive a tiny fraction of the subs.
I actually think it would hurt their subs. So if they've got 10 million subscribers on Xbox One and PC, and if you say, right, you now need to have a certain high-end PC and you now have a Series X to play our next big game, and you're one of those 10 million subscribers, you go, yeah, all right, well, I'm out. I have to buy a new box in order to continue my subscription still to be valuable. I'm not interested. Imagine if Netflix said, like, to watch the next set of Netflix show, you need a 4K TV. They would lose subscribers. And I think that Xbox needs to manage that transition, which is the reason why they say, even though last night it didn't seem quite so important, they say that Xbox One Series X games need to be playable on Xbox One, which does harm Series X sales, but that isn't the priority. Potentially harms it. The priority is Game Pass. And so they are willing to take that hit if it means that they'll get more subs.
We kind of touched on something there, Chris, roughly. So all the talk was that there wasn't really going to be any next-gen exclusives. That kind of got blown out the water last night, didn't it, Andy? Which is a bit of a surprise, actually, given everything they've been saying. Maybe not a surprise, but a surprise at the same time, because surely no one thought there wouldn't be any next-gen only exclusives.
I do wonder how much of... so they potentially showed 6 Series X exclusives. We still don't know whether that's the case, because their messaging is so bloody confusing. I do wonder how much of that was in response to the kind of groundswell of negativity that was building around the cross-gen strategy. I mean, certainly, I'm sure last week on this show, I had a good old moan about their cross-gen strategy and how, it was concerning to me, actually how it would hit the quality of the games. And I feel kind of vindicated looking at Halo, actually.
Yeah, the loading lift. The very obvious
loading lift. I didn't even notice the loading lift. But this is the thing, right? My bigger concern with Halo is that people look at it and going, oh, it looks like a Xbox One game. Well, like I said last week, my bigger concern will be, well, how good's the AI in that game? I mean, I interviewed 343 last night, and someone asked about, this series is known for its enemy AI that kind of defined Halo. How have you advanced? And I was sat there thinking, well, probably not at all, because it needs to run on Xbox One. That's just the sort of stuff that doesn't scale, right? You can't have the enemies behave a completely different way. Well, you could, but it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
The scale of the environment, I asked them about that. I mean, it's supposed to have an SSD in it, right? Like you said about the loading elevator just then. I didn't even notice it, but I'm thinking more like, well,
it was a pretty one.
You look at some of the,
but
you look at some of the logging issues that are very clearly apparent in that demo. Look, it's a pre-release demo. It's you know, it's in development, fine, but that's the sort of stuff I wouldn't expect to see on an SSD that they're kind of bigging up as being incredible. The very, very close-up logging issues, and again, that's the sort of stuff that I was concerned about that would come about from the cross-gen strategy. But going back to your original question, yeah, I do wonder how much of the fact they kind of showed potentially 6 exclusives was in reaction or preparation for that kind of negativity. And if it was, I think it did the job, because that kills it dead now. Anyone who says, well, you know, Xbox Series X doesn't have any exclusives, why do I need to care? Well, that's now definitely not the case.
But don't you want exclusives?
Definitely, we still don't actually know, right?
Because,
like, you know, to be clear for the rest of the conversation, the trailers on the showcase listed the platforms very clearly down the bottom. So, for example, Halo Infinite is listed as Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Windows PC. So, certain titles like Everwild, which was previously announced for Xbox One, is only listed as Series X and PC. So, obviously, based on those listings, you've worked out that there's 6 exclusives. I think it's like Everwild and you know, Forza and the Avowed, the new Obsidian RPG. But then, since that's happened, the actual Xbox.com websites list Xbox One, but yet the press releases don't list Xbox One. And Aaron Greenberg's replied to it on social media and said, I think he said, all future first-party titles are developed for Xbox Series X first. It's up to our developers to decide, you know, whether they release on Xbox One based on whether it's good for their game or the community, which is, again, it just confuses it even more. Like, he even says in this note that I'm not necessarily saying those games won't ship on Xbox One. What? So what?
Yeah, that's obvious. That's obvious PR speak. But it's clearly pretty obvious. I mean, if the thing is down to the developers to do that, then it's pretty obvious then that surely isn't always going to happen. So the idea that there can always be, you know, bridge to both consoles, it's just surely nonsense. Chris,
well,
go on.
Well, I mean, this is the thing I found really interesting. So I decided to look at what Xbox One games are actually coming out that we know of. If we assume the ones that didn't have a logo on the presentation, and there's actually quite a lot. Right, if you get like Tell Me Why is coming to Xbox One, Gears Tactics has still got to come to Xbox One, Microsoft Flight Simulator is coming to Xbox One. You've got Grounded, and you've got Halo Infinite, and I think in the end I counted about 9 Xbox One games coming from first party still, which is quite a lot. And I guess if you're also a Game Pass subscriber to my Xbox One, that's great. You've got loads of games still coming up. I think what surprised me is it doesn't feel so significant anymore if Forza, Fable, and Everwild and Avowed are not Xbox exclusives. If we're talking about Battletoads and Tell Me Why and Gears Tactics, it's a bit like, well, so PC games and some indie level titles. That's, well, you know, whatever. If we're talking about Forza, like the massive AAA games that will have like ray tracing and all the super bells and whistles you expect from a AAA game, if those games are exclusive to Series X, because they might be years out, I'm assuming they're years out, then it's a bit like...
All of those exclusives looked early, right? I mean, I know nothing about any of them in particular to suggest otherwise.
There were cinematics as well, weren't they? So, you know, you just...
They're all cinematics. I think that was the thing. Like, you know, Fable, I mean, the Fable, ending on the Fable announcement was actually a bit anticlimactic because we all knew that was happening. Yeah. We all knew that game was coming out. We all knew Playground was making it. So to end on a teaser for a game we already knew about is a bit...
I mean, I can't imagine any of those games will be out even next year.
No. No, exactly. So I think the statement that Microsoft said originally about all games coming to Xbox One is true, because their first set of games that are coming out for Series X are Xbox One games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It doesn't contradict their statement. It just kind of flies in the face a little bit of what they've publicly been pushing for the last couple of months, right? So then hold this showcase that here's a ton of games that are not coming to Xbox One. I mean, even if assuming that they're not coming out for at least 18 months, right? They didn't have to show those games. You know, that's a conscious decision. That's what it leads me to believe that this is a tactical thing to kind of put to bed a lot of that negativity.
Can you imagine, though, what would happen how rubbish would that presentation have been without Avowed, Forza, Fable, and Everwild?
Obviously, I'm assuming they'd be showing, because obviously they're going to have another presentation around, you know, August time. And I imagine they'll show a bunch of games that are going to come out a lot sooner than them. That's my assumption. It's nothing that I know about.
How do you deal with then the perception, I guess, with because as I said before, I've always been in the PlayStation camp, and the one thing that appeals to me about them is their exclusives, I guess. And if I've actually been wanting to be really hyped about the Xbox Series X, because I kind of want to jump onto that bandwagon myself, but I actually kind of want exclusives for that console. I know that sounds weird, but I want things that have been, from my perspective, at the very least, I want things that have been built for the Xbox Series X, not things that feel like they've been kind of downgraded a little bit just to kind of fit in the Xbox One world. And given the fact that Xbox has always pushed the power, as they talk about quite a lot, isn't that a little bit of a it's kind of a conflict of interest there, isn't it, to an extent? So you've got this really powerful console, but then you're saying all the games are meant to be able to play on it on a lesser console. For someone like me, how would you kind of market that towards them? Because I actually want those exclusives, but then I get messages that maybe these games aren't going to be fully optimized for this new full console. Does that make sense?
If you're in the PlayStation camp, right? So you're in the PlayStation camp. You probably already got your PS5 pre-ordered, even though whatever you got it all. You know what you're getting. Like, I'm getting Spider-Man. I'm getting the Planet. You know what I'm getting. And then Xbox comes along and says, "Do you want to buy this console?" You're like, you're going to go, "No, I'm in camp PlayStation." But if they come to you and say, "Do you want to buy this console?" No. Well, do you want to sign up to xCloud? It's only $1. Or do you want to just, if you've got a gaming PC, you can just get all the games on Game. Why don't you sign up to Game Pass and try out all these games? That makes you go, I might do that. I might not buy another console because I've already got one, but I might go down those routes because, and that is a lot more compelling. I'm a big Rare fan, so I will definitely get an Xbox console, and I'm also a big Insomniac fan, so try and get both if I can. Yeah. But I know of people who are in PlayStation who I think might find there's always an Xbox game they're interested in now because of the way they distribute their content. Now, obviously, that does mean that their content isn't exclusive. It doesn't have all the advantages of being an exclusive in terms of built for that piece of hardware. But the benefit, and this is what Phil Spencer said in an interview with me a couple of weeks ago, the benefit of being able to be everywhere outweighs that in their mind. And I mean, I don't know if I agree. I think it depends how many subscribers they can get. But entirely. It definitely makes it an easier decision, though.
One game that could be very, 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 very crucial to that is Fable. It's the worst kept secret in games, I guess. We all knew it was going to come in. Is anyone else a little bit disappointed initially that it was just a cinematic, I guess? Because I honestly was hoping for a little bit more. That was going to be essentially the one more thing, right at the very end, which it wasn't obviously that, but you know what I mean? Because can it even deliver? Was it a little bit disappointing that it was just a cinematic, Andy?
Yeah, I think they probably misjudged that a little bit. I do wonder how much we lose on the audience side by this not being a physical show, because that probably would have been a lot more exciting if you had, all of the fanboys they ship in from across the USA, going mental. It probably would have been a greater moment, right, than what it was, like just a stream for something we knew about. That's undoubtedly. I mean, they've been working on that game for at least 2 years, but it's undoubtedly a huge game, right? So I imagine it probably is still in a comparatively. Sorry, go on, Chris. Your mouth's moving.
No, they're still building the team. I know they've got the key people in place, and that game's well in development. But
do you know, Xbox basically employ the entire Rocksteady, like Batman Arkham writing team now.
No,
like pretty much all of them are on Fable. And I didn't even realize this until yesterday when I did my 343 interview. The associate creative director of the new Halo was the lead narrative designer on all the Arkham games. Just a bit of trivia for you.
No.
For anyone who likes the stories in Batman. Yeah.
Good facts.
Some true facts there. I liked the tone of the trailer. I think probably I've seen a lot of people say that, because my concern always with that, as a Fable fan, was, well, are they going to be able to hit the tone properly? Because it's a very unique game, Fable. Very, very unique game. There's not really anything like it in terms of tone and feel, and just how
British
kind of whimsical it was. Yeah, it was British, but it was also even uniquely among British games. It was such a whimsical, irreverent kind of humor, right? But also, even that kind of fed into the game itself. It was unconventional. Because of the Peter Molyneux thing, right? They just weren't afraid to put in game systems that were completely, I was trying to say off the wall. With AAA games, we're so used to everything being off the shelf. like in terms of design. And there's obviously reason to that you want the player to pick the controller up and know, well, B button ducks, and click the stick in and I'll run, and the minimap does this. Whereas so within that space, when you see someone go like, oh, well, there's no minimap in this game, we've invented something called breadcrumb trail. That's like, whoa, even though it's not that big a deal, but someone's actually trying something new in a AAA space. That's what Fable used to do, right? Oh, here's a dog who's your companion, and he's the only one who'll tell you stuff. There'll be no UI elements, and they used to do. They used to genuinely try new stuff, which I hope that Playground kind of recognize that spirit and give it a go as well. And obviously, with the talented writing team they've got in place, I've no doubt that it'll be really funny. I guess there's another bit as well that it was a little stinge of like kind of pathos around Fable, where I can't help but feel for all those poor people at Lionhead who wanted to make Fable 4 not too long ago.
My friends as well, actually.
They were closed, and then within the space of half a generation, they're making it again. It does feel a little bit frustrating.
Yeah. So my brother worked at Lionhead when it went down, so he was there, and some of the stories that I've heard about that. I mean, let's be clear. Lionhead had a string of flops leading up to Fable Legends. Fable the Journey. You did feel like they were a studio though that tried to, rather than decide we're building this right now, how do we make this fit with Microsoft strategy? They did the other way around.
A string of flops that I don't doubt they were told to make.
Well, no, this is what I mean. Like, it's interesting because I've done a lot of interviews with the historical peers during that time, the Matric era of Xbox, and studios were fearful of that, and they were all going, right, how do we make sure that Xbox still sees us as valuable? And you had things like, so you might take a game, they go, right, we need to make this game work in an Xbox Live, cloud streaming, free to play, smart glass world, right? Which is now what Lionhead did is they did it almost the other way. They went, right, we've got to have smart glass, we've got to have free to play, and they made a Fable game to match. And then it was quite the end of development. This is a story that I heard. I don't know how true it is. Spencer, who's now taken over, went to Lionhead and went, right, you don't have to do this anymore, guys. You can do Fable 4 if you want. You don't have to do this free to play thing. And at that point, the game was so far into development, they went, no, we'll stick with this. And that is ultimately their downfall because, whereas other developers, where they were given the same option to not go down the route of smart glass and all that kind of stuff, were very quick to drop them. So it might have been, and then you think it's like that second Playground team actually was started to be built in 2017, which is only like, just over 6 months after the Lionhead closed.
That was mad. They were being built at the same time we were building Platonic. So I remember being sat with them at like various awards dues and stuff. And we were in the same boat. We were sharing tips, like, how are you getting on? And now they're like, it's mad to see how big they are, like looking back at those kind of origins.
Well, and so I don't know. I feel I do feel bad for Lionhead because Lionhead was such a unique company, and it had that sort of whimsical thing where they would just try mental stuff. I don't know. I feel like they just got caught in the gaps. I actually think if the game had got cancelled a year later, they'd still be here. Do you know what I mean? Like they would go, right, okay, well now we move you on to this new thing because now we need studios, we need first party games, we want big exclusives.
Yeah, it's a shame. It does feel like they really kind of missed the boat.
Yeah, I think they would have. I think there's a lot of things that would have survived if it had been if it was only a little bit later. I think things like that Platinum game that got cancelled. I think it might have survived in a Game Pass world. But it sort of got cancelled just before
this is the thing that's most exciting about Game Pass for me is that I look at an acquisition like a Double Fine, and Double Fine put out a lot of like really unique, great like kind of small games, right? Like I think of that game, The Cave, they did, the Metroidvania type thing. That's what I really hope, and I imagine they've probably been brought in to do. Like I can't imagine that Double Fine have been brought in to do massive AAA things. Like they can release a game every year.
And this is the great thing about those studios is they can I interviewed Double Fine, Obsidian, In Exile, and Mojang. I don't really count, but those three in particular a couple of weeks ago, and they all want something slightly different. In Exile do want to get bigger, so they make quite small games. They want to get bigger. They do things like In Exile told me a great story about how they the way they used to make games is there's like a free asset site. We get a load of historical assets for free. And they used to buy those, not even buy them, take those assets and stick them in their game. Right? Because it was cheap. It was the easiest way of putting great looking assets into their game without needing to have an art team. But now they can have an art team. So Microsoft's given them the money to do that. So they want to get bigger. They want to, stop.
It suits their genre as well, right? Like they make, good strategy role-playing games.
Yeah, so it works the genre, and that's what they can do now. And Double Fine, talking to Tim Schafer, he was very much like, I don't really want to change much at all. I want to be able to keep doing this without having to worry about where we're going to find the money.
That Psychonauts, I love a bit of developer trivia, don't I? That Psychonauts team is really strong as well, by the way. I don't think they're talking about that, but if you go and research it and have a look at the leads behind Psychonauts 2, they're like BioShock guys and Halo guys. I know it's not necessarily like fits the genre, but they've got like a strong team there. They've not like pulled in guys from just who's around on Double Fine. They've brought in guys, big AAA guys, to make that game. I think it's going to be really, really good.
So away from basically, we touched on Fable there, and obviously Psychonauts, and we've already touched on Halo, and we mentioned Forze. Was there anything else that kind of stood out as a bit of a surprise for you guys from that showcase? Any kind of hidden gems amongst all those trailers, I guess, for you, Chris?
Everworld looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
It's beautiful, doesn't it?
Everworld looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not. Louise O'Connor is the lead on that game, and she's a classic. She's an animator and from that world, so I expect that's the one thing I definitely expected from that game was to look nice. But the
she being hands-on with animation. I would have thought that was mostly Stevenson.
Oh, yeah, she's not anymore. She's a producer now. She's in management.
Yeah, exactly. I was saying, I look at that game and I see that it's all his classic art. It's...
No, yeah, I meant that I suspect the manager in charge of that game. Has very much an eye for that kind of thing.
I see what you mean. Yeah, and the soundtrack's beautiful as well.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure how much game there is, but it looks absolutely amazing.
Experience at least.
But for me, we knew Everwild was going to be there. Right, we knew Forze. Also, Forze is the biggest surprise to me.
I said it wasn't going to be there.
The biggest surprise for me was Forze is not out this Christmas. I think that was the big.
Yeah,
honestly,
that is really surprising.
Yeah, you'd think so. Given. Okay. Yeah.
How long's it been since the last main Forze? It's got to be 2-3 years.
3. It was 2 years ago since Horizon 4. So there wasn't one last Christmas. There isn't one this Christmas.
Without sounding like incredibly ignorant, what have they been doing?
So in my I did an interview with Matt Booty, and in that interview he said to me that what Horizon has influenced motorsport in terms of how it does service-based stuff. So I wonder if they are doing something different, and that's what's taking a bit longer.
Technology's big behind that game as well, right? They could have just been focusing on that.
Yeah, true. But the other thing is, I think the only thing that surprised me, and it wasn't a surprise, was that we saw Obsidian's next RPG. I mean, Obsidian have got a lot going on at the moment. There are 3 products out there during that showcase. I didn't expect to see Avowed. Obsidian are working on an RPG. We all knew that. And I know it's probably quite far out, but that was the only thing that made me go, oh, they're showing that. I didn't expect to see that.
That looks like a game that could be big, right? I mean, it's already getting buzz around this small demo. I mean, everyone loves a big medieval fantasy RPG.
Pure Skyrim vibes, and that's definitely not a bad thing, is it, for an awful lot of people? I mean, that's what I got from it, some kind of fantastical kind of Skyrim-y thing. I guess
they would have been perfect. I remember thinking, Skyrim's got to be 10 years now, almost, right? I remember thinking when Skyrim was the biggest game, again, it's still huge, but at the time, it was the GTA of that year. It was absolutely mammoth. I remember thinking at the time, why don't they go and get Obsidian and get them to do Skyrim 2 in 2 years? Because they would have done a good job.
Because shoulda, coulda, woulda, I guess. Before we end this, was that a successful showcase last night? I know everyone has different opinions on that kind of thing. Do you feel like it did what it needed to do, Chris?
I don't think it was overly convincing to buy Series X this Christmas. I think it showed promise for Series X's future. I don't think there was a lot on there that made you go, oh, there's a lot of big games coming out this Christmas. Not like, I don't think it did quite as good a job as PlayStation did selling PS5, but I think it did a good job selling Game Pass as a concept. I think we saw a lot of different games, huge variety. Like an Xbox conference is normally violence and shooting and driving, and that's what violence, shooting and driving. Gears, Forza, Halo, Gears, Forza, Halo. We didn't get that. We got Psychonauts and all sort of crazy stuff. Jack Black playing a song, whatever. It got a bit weird in places, and as a result of that, I think it did a good job of saying. I probably have got a few people going, oh, Avowed, that might be. I'll be interested in that, and I think that is, as a result, I think they did a pretty decent job for that side of things. I think in terms of trying to sell a Series X this Christmas, I can't see anything topping PS5.
What about for you, Andy?
I think they did a really good job. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Chris said, that it was a great show for Xbox, not necessarily Series X, but I don't think that's going to change. You know, I think for that is the strategy, right? That's always going to be the case for the foreseeable future. From a PR perspective, I think they did a particularly good job. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, they showed exclusive games, which kind of kills dead any of that criticism. There's a lot of in there for fans to look forward to. I think even Halo being a little bit underwhelming graphically serves them well to have that up front now.
Yeah,
because really it means that it can only get better as they kind of go forward to release. And I was also really pleased with, as someone who's been going to Xbox, I mean, my first Xbox press conference was E3 2004, which I went to. So someone who's been sitting through these for almost 2 decades, I was really pleased by the kind of their portfolio of games, the variety there. It's probably the first time that I can remember in an Xbox show that it's not just felt like gung-ho, you know, American focused stuff, like all shooters, all racers. There was a lot of different kind of genres and variety in there. It felt like there's a lot of games for different people. So that was pleasing to see Xbox kind of make that transition.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up there for the second ever episode of Off The Record. Do let us know down in the comments what you make of Xbox games you showcased last night. Chris, thank you for coming on, mate, once again.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Andy, as ever, thank you for coming on to this episode, which you organised, so of course you're here anyway. But guys, do subscribe if you're new to this channel. Make sure to give this video a like and all that kind of stuff. We'll be back very, very soon with more videos. See you in a bit.